on Sky News Australia. This is the Rita Panahi Show.
Good evening and welcome to the Rita Panahi Show. Coming up tonight, we cover everything from the Victorian Libs lurching from one crisis to the next to Super Tuesday in America. Joining me is a stellar lineup of guests, including Amy Horowitz, Drew Holden and Emily Carver. And we always have Lefties losing it tonight, starring AOC, copping a taste of her own medicine.
You're going to cut this and you're going to clip this so that it's completely out of context. I already said that it was, and y'all are just going to pretend that it wasn't over and over again. It's up, man. If you're not helping these people, TV. And you're not helping them.
You refuse to.
You're not helping them.
Let's bring in Sky News contributor Kosha Gada for the day's top stories. Let's start with the Matildas captain, Sam Kerr, who is making moves to have her case of aggravated racial harassment of a police officer dismissed. She is expected to claim abuse of process at a hearing next month. She has pled not guilty. Meanwhile, Football Australia have been forced to concede they knew nothing about the case. Kosha, what do you think this case does, however it ends, to Sam Kerr's public image? She is one of our top sporting stars. According to the Australian Financial Review, she earned over $3 million last year. Is this going to damage her?
You know, this case is very curious for many different levels. She is a very polarizing figure, and I think this incident is just going to amplify that polarization. So there's people supporting her, and we should say, obviously, she does deserve the presumption of innocence like everyone else and see her day in court. On the flip side, a lot of people did not like the virtue signaling that she did against racism and linking arms at Tokyo Olympics and things like that, like many other athletes do. So they kind of see the irony in this because the allegation is about racism, which she was signaling a lot about.
And the fact she didn't tell anybody, because you would expect there would be some obligation to tell somebody who's paying her wages.
Yes, and that's the one piece of the story that I guess is not polarizing. It's kind of unifying, where everybody's scratching their heads, where her coach didn't know, Football Australia didn't know, and that's unusual because this happened over a year ago, and it's just coming out this week. And you know, it looks like a cover-up. Who knows what her reasons were? I guess she wanted to keep it private, but she's very famous.
I understand why she wouldn't want anyone to know this unless they absolutely had to. Perhaps she was hoping they wouldn't press ahead with the charges. But what is curious is also the time delays in all of this happening. I don't know if this is normal for the UK system. If it is, that's a problem because, as they say, justice delayed is justice denied.
True, and we don't know enough since this news just came out. Was it just normal machinations in the system there? Was there some sort of mediation or something going on behind the scenes, which might point to your point that maybe she was keeping it quiet because she thought she wouldn't have to reveal it? Who knows? I think more will come out in the days to come, but I do think that she's paying a little bit of a price reputationally for sure.
Now, another disturbing story from Melbourne. The Herald Sun reports a man from Melbourne's northwest believes he was attacked in a hate crime because he works for a Jewish boss. The man, who is Palestinian, was allegedly kidnapped from his car, brutally attacked with a hammer because he worked for a Zionist Jewish boss. His boss reported that the employee knew the people personally who allegedly attacked him. Herald Sun has identified them as a prominent female human rights advocate and a man who is a serial anti-Israeli activist. The victim was allegedly told by his attackers that in working for a Jewish boss, he had lost his faith. He has also alleged that a hammer was used to break his finger. There are restrictions on what we can say about this case, Kosha, but it just adds to this climate of fear that I know many people in the Jewish community feel. This individual, I don't think, is Jewish, but there is just such a climate of conflict and hostility that we haven't experienced really for a long time.
It's true, and it doesn't seem to be abating. It seems like with every week that ticks by, it's getting more and more intense on every level, politically, internationally, and then even stories like this, which is ultimately a crime story. Obviously, the process will run its course in the judiciary, but the details of it seem quite astonishing if there's truth to what they're saying, a Palestinian employee working for a Jewish boss, and what that means, and the fact that they knew him and all of that. It reads like something out of a crime thriller, but just with that overcasting of the racial, religious, ethnic conflict between those two groups.
Now, we are learning more about those who were inconvenienced by yesterday's climate protests, including a Melbourne couple who were rushing to the hospital when a bunch of protesters used a rental truck to block 3 lanes of traffic. The distressed couple were forced to pull over on the side of the road, and they had to wait for an ambulance. The reason they were rushing to hospital, Kosha, was because the lady was giving birth. She was in labour, and in the end, the baby boy arrived on the side of the road. So paramedics arrived some 15 to 20 minutes later. They rushed the mum and baby to St Vincent's Hospital. In the end, it's a happy ending, but it could have been disastrous, because sometimes you do need to have medical care when you're giving birth. And can you imagine what would have happened in this instance if that delay was caused allegedly by climate protesters?
I mean, those disruption-causing protesters are some of the least sympathetic figures in the world, and they don't do a lot to help their cause, actually, with this. And it's bad enough when they're disrupting people from getting to work or dropping their kids off to school and all those things. This story takes it to the next level. Couldn't make it up. It has the makings of a movie screenplay, I think. If they wanted to be portrayed, somebody should take that up.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, thank God she was able to give birth with minimal drama. There were some teachers who were going past who stopped and helped. So everyone did their part, except for the protesters, to have a happy ending here. But my gosh, it could have been a disaster. Now, this story has got people talking in the US, and I'm sure right here, once they learn the details, the US Veterans Affairs Secretary had to step in and overrule a woke decision to ban this iconic image of a sailor and a woman kissing as New York celebrates the end of the Second World War. All department healthcare facilities were told to remove the photo as it, and I quote here, depicts a non-consensual act and is inconsistent with the VA's no tolerance policy towards sexual harassment and assault. The photo also does not help the Veterans Health Administration foster a more trauma-informed environment that promotes the psychological safety of our employees and the veterans we serve. Again, that's a direct quote. This is just another example, Kosha, of these bodies being preoccupied with leftist dogma instead of actually focusing on, I don't know, defending the nation, serving their members. That is an iconic image. Who's upset by it?
That's the thing, just the people who are always upset with something except the things they should be upset about, such as the VA being one of the most dysfunctional agencies in the US government. And it makes a lot of people very angry because it's meant to serve our veterans. And they have a lot to clean up. They shouldn't be focusing on this. Speaking of happy endings, like we spoke in the previous topic, this photo is iconic with one of the happiest endings, with the Allied forces winning World War II, the role of the US in that victory. And nobody has an issue with it. Nobody's complained about it, as far as we know. And just for these bureaucrats to do that, it's very tone deaf. I would say it's a win for social media in this case, because it was out and reversed, I think, within hours.
Well, the US Veterans Affairs Secretary took action after the social media outrage. It really hadn't got into the mainstream press yet, and he got in there. But when you sort of look at the form of the bureaucrat who made that decision and her politics, you can understand why we're in the state we are. Now, I want to bring to your attention a fantastic piece in today's Australian newspaper from Janet Albrechtson on the profound failures of our hopelessly woke operators in corporate Australia. She writes, these failures are not just a tinny adherence to elite progressive obsessions such as The Voice and the downgrading of Australia Day. Those particular blunders are just a symptom of more significant failures. This is a very good point, because by focusing on this divisive issues that have got nothing to do with the running of their business, they're actually neglecting what they should be focusing on. And we see that time and time again. And for every go woke, go broke example we can point to, there are plenty of others where that doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm. It was a great piece. I think there's a couple of layers to it. So one is there is this emotionality that's infiltrated leadership in general, and there's a whole discussion to be had about why that is and the types of people that are promoted up to the leadership classes in every sector, how we're taught to always just lean into emotions. And I think this is one outcome from that. Then there's something else more concrete with the ESG and DEI infrastructure that has captured corporations, and that's a very systematic mechanism that had been deployed. And a lot of companies, are making decisions or have been making decisions to raise their scores against these kind of abstract standards, which is ultimately what those things are. And it was always going to end, I think, not well, because they're just incompatible with traditional business standards of profitability and maximizing shareholder value. And I think we're seeing that unraveling starting to happen a little bit.
And she argues that beautifully, that they're failing to properly discharge their economic and commercial duties when they're obsessing about this stuff. And this ESG fad that we have seen in corporate Australia, it's already being discontinued in the US. It's been discredited in multiple states where governors have come out and spoken out against this. But here, there seems to be no awareness that this ESG obsession isn't all rainbows and light. There's actually a really dark activist, leftist imperative behind it that is divisive. If you're serving the best interests of your key stakeholders, your shareholders and your staff, you should not be getting involved in these games.
Absolutely. I think, often, not always, Australia will lag behind what's happening in the corporate world and even culturally in the US by a few years. So the unraveling of the US is very current. Bill Ackman and Harvard, Florida just banned it in their state government, and there's other things. As that happens, I would expect to see it trickle down into other Western nations and Australia probably in the next 3 to 5 years, if not sooner, but we shall see.
Now, related to that, corporate insolvencies are set to reach the highest level since the global financial crisis, with insolvencies this year tracking 36% higher than pre-COVID levels. This is not surprising when you look at not just the interest rate increases, the cost increases, limp consumer spending. And, we did shut down the economy and just print huge amounts of money. You would expect that to have an impact. Now, I've got to move on to Super Tuesday because we're running out of time, and this is the key news of the day. It's looking like Trump v. Biden again. Trump just having a super Tuesday. How do you see these results?
No surprise, I think, to what all the polls have been saying and what people can see with their own eyes and ears, that he is dominating, is expected to dominate in all the states that have closed as we speak, dominating Nikki Haley. Everyone expects that she'll suspend her campaign after today because he will have the delegates needed to clinch the nomination. If not today, it'll be soon, in a few weeks' time. On the Biden side, he's dominating as well. I think one story that's underreported that I think is very important is the cannibalization that may or may not happen with third-party candidates like RFK Jr. or Cornel West on the Democrat side, because he has underperformed Biden with certain segments of the electorate that are leaking to those. So we might see something there that's interesting. But other than that, I think the Biden versus Trump outcome is a foregone conclusion.
Absolutely. There was some fascinating polling from the swing states with those extra candidates listed, and Trump was in even better position than when it was just Trump v. Biden in those crucial swing states. Something that I noticed, Sky News Washington correspondent Annalise Nielsen was reporting today, was the fake independents. This is something our Australian audience may not be aware, but because the Democrats aren't voting in any primaries, you've got Democrats registering as independents so they can vote in the Republican primaries and vote against Trump. That was something Annalise was reporting on. Is that going to have an impact at the end, or is just Nikki so far behind that she can't depend on those little tricks to,
She
to
can't.
stay in the race.
And it artificially inflates the picture. This has been a big story, in New Hampshire and South Carolina. Some states have closed primaries where Democrats can't do that, but a lot of them have open primaries. And there is polling that suggests people who actually voted for Biden in 2020 are voting for Nikki in the general election. Hypothetically, if she were the nominee, which she won't be, we can't expect that any of those people would continue to stick with her. They would shift to the Democrat. And you cannot, in general, win the presidential election as a GOP candidate with only independents. You have to have the base, and she's just never had the base behind her.
And we showed the results, and they're pretty emphatic wins to Trump pretty much across the board. Differing margins, but all very comfortable wins. Kosha Gada, thank you so much for your time this evening. Now, the Princess of Wales will come out of hiding in June, according to the British Army, as they announce she will attend the King's birthday celebrations on the 15th. It's the first official duty announced for the Duchess since she underwent abdominal surgery in January, although Kensington House has yet to confirm her appearance. Joining me now is Sky News contributor Emily Carver in London. Emily, this update is doing nothing to quell the rumours about the Duchess and her health.
Yes, of course. And there's been an update too on this story. So apparently the army did not confirm the fact that they were going to be advertising that the Princess of Wales would be at the Trooping of the Colour in June at this event. And they've now taken it down. So now there will be even more speculation. So this was on the army website. They advertised that the Princess of Wales would be appearing at this event in June. Now they've taken it down because Kensington Palace said, we have not confirmed that. So they've taken it down. So it's all a bit messy. That, of course, is going to fuel even more speculation over the Princess of Wales and her health and everything else. So it's all a little bit tricky. And of course, today as well, we've had the the paparazzi pictures of her all over the American press and on the tabloid magazine outlets, the TMZ, the British press. There's been a media blackout. They haven't shown the picture, of course, out of taste and decency. But everyone has seen the photo now. She was in a car being driven by her mother. So, of course, the speculation is going to continue. And we don't know if she'll be at this event in June.
Now, let's move on to more heavier issues. A free speech activist has been jailed in the UK for 2 years for creating an online collection of downloadable stickers that contain slogans like we will be a minority in our homeland by 2066 and mass immigration is white genocide. And also I think stickers said things like they seek conquest, not asylum. The prosecution argued that the stickers were intended to stir up racial hatred, and Sam Kerr, 34, was found guilty of encouraging racially aggravated criminal damage because his stickers were involved in other people's stickering incidents. Maybe you can explain that to me. Now, Emily, you can disagree with this dude, vehemently disagree, and apparently some of his opinions are abhorrent, but jail for wrong thing? I mean, did he actually incite violence?
It's quite incredible, really, how someone can be imprisoned for this. He may well be the most horrendous person, a Nazi sympathiser, a white supremacist, an anti-Semite. But surely producing stickers should not lead to jail time. But this is where we are with our hate speech laws, where we're with and so on, that these sorts of activities are illegal in British law. Inciting racial hatred, you can very much claim that this man is doing that. He said some anti-Semitic stickers as well as the anti-immigration stickers and others and so on. But we're in this very difficult place because my problem is not that this man is someone who I really would like the law to protect, but the problem is that the law is not being evenly applied in this country. I'm sure you've seen that in London, you've got the now proscribed terror group Hizb ut-Tahrir shouting for jihad on the streets. The Metropolitan Police in London say they've investigated and they found no offence because jihad has many different can be interpreted in many ways. It has many meanings, so therefore no offence has been committed. You've got 2 women charged with terror offences for wearing Hamas paraglider pictures on their clothing in a protest only a week after the Hamas terror attack on October the 7th. They were let off with no prison time, essentially a slap on the wrist. So a lot of normal British people in this country are thinking, how on earth is the law being applied evenly here? And now the government's trying to broaden what it means to be an extremist, when really what they want to tackle is Islamist extremism, and they are making a hash of it.
Well, absolutely. And we had that speech from the Prime Minister again doing this both sides thing when it's just so intellectually dishonest. That is not what's happening in the UK right now. And meanwhile, we've got the Church of England in the West Midlands region looking for an anti-racism practice officer to help them deconstruct whiteness and eliminate racism. Deconstruct whiteness, eliminate racism. Do they not realise deconstructing whiteness is in fact a racist pursuit in itself? And that's not all. The Church of England has also moved to put aside some £1 billion to pay for slavery reparations. What is going on in the UK, Emily? It's a question that I ask far too often, but it's valid. What is going on in the UK?
Oh, I don't know where to begin. I mean, the Church of England has very much swallowed the critical race theory mantra, the idea that to be white makes you racist by default. It seems to have fallen hook, line and sinker for that following the Black Lives Matter. And the Archbishop of Canterbury, he is so often accused of being the wokest man in Britain. He commissioned this report for the Church of England to look at slavery reparations. It came back and told him, no, £100 million to atone for our sins is not enough. You have to raise £1 billion. And local parishes at the same time are saying, hang on a minute, the roofs of our churches are falling in. Oh, our congregations are dwindling. People aren't going to church anymore.
I wonder why.
Focus on perhaps talking about how Christianity is a brilliant thing, rather than trying to raise money for Black-led businesses worldwide. I mean, it's utterly bizarre. The slave trade, thankfully, finished many, many years ago. There aren't any living victims of the slave trade in this country. So I'm not exactly sure what they're trying to do. And also, why just Black-led schemes? What about all the other ethnic groups in this country? It makes absolutely no sense. And the Church of England seems to have lost its way.
Just finally, former UK Home Secretary Suella Braverman, she's weighing in on this controversy surrounding a murderer, a biological male who killed a man and also gruesomely killed a cat. But this male murderer identifies as female and everyone seems desperate to respect his new pronouns. But not Braverman. She wrote in the Daily Mail, the case attracts attention because of the truly sickening character, but for those of us who believe in the truth, it is the reporting of the case that has added an extra layer of horror. For Blake is a transgender woman, also known as a man, identifying as a woman, but still very much a man. You wouldn't have understood this fact from the reporting, which in some cases, including a shocking BBC News Channel piece, never even mentioned this mere detail. The truth can be uncomfortable, but if our journalists fail to report the truth on basic matters like biology and on issues affecting public safety and criminal justice, then we are on a slippery slope to a dystopian world of doublespeak, misinformation and dangerous deception. Emily Carver, I couldn't have said it better myself, but I think we're not on the slippery slope, but we're down the bottom. We're there. How much worse can it get?
I mean, thank goodness this murderer will be going to a male prison. At least that is something. But the way this story has been reported, Suella's absolutely right. It's absolutely mind-blowing. You've got Sky News over here saying it's a woman in their bulletin. You've got the Guardian newspaper not saying that it's a transgender woman even, and then adding that in, but only in the 5th paragraph. You had a columnist standing down from her position over this because she thought it was so ridiculous. Of course, you've got J.K. Rowling, one of the only people who speaks up on this with a massive platform, and a celebrity, one of the only ones who dares to talk about this issue. She luckily drew attention to it, which got people talking and realizing that this type of reporting is just crazy. It's just not factual. And the problem is, it's problematic when it comes to statistics. It's not only offensive to women who don't tend to commit these types of heinous crimes, let's be honest, but also it just completely blurs fact and fiction. Not great for crime statistics.
No, and just a matter of reality. This is dystopian craziness that you can't even trust a news report about who committed a crime. Emily Carver, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Coming up, lefties use lawfare to bring down Donald Trump, and everyone's favourite segment, lefties losing it. Welcome back. It's time for Lefties Losing It. Let's start with AOC. She's getting a taste of her own medicine.
You're going to cut this and you're going to clip this so that it's completely out of context. I already said that it was, and y'all are just going to pretend that it wasn't over and over again. It's up, man. You're not helping these people, and you're not helping them.
You refuse to.
You're not helping them.
Wasn't she the one who advised lefties like her to make Republicans feel uncomfortable in public, to get in their faces? Well, honey, call this instant karma.
You refuse to call it a genocide in front of everyone.
I need you to understand.
It's not okay that there's a genocide happening and you're not actively against it.
You're lying.
I'm lying?
You're not.
You went on TV and avoided talking about it.
Because now you can't say it's a genocide or what you're deciding in a political case. If you can't call it a genocide, then how do you say it? We're not lying.
We're not lying.
You've been
We're on
saying it in
TV.
interviews. It's insane. You haven't been calling it a genocide.
Now let's check in on the president, the leader of the free world, who's living in a state of denial. Here he is asked about his poor poll numbers. Listen to his answer.
Mr. President, what's your message to Democrats who are concerned about your poll numbers?
My poll numbers, the last 5 polls you guys don't report, I'm winning. 5 in a row. You guys only look at the New York Times. They're a great paper.
That poor old delusional soul. You almost feel sorry for him. Now, I love this clip so much, I have put it on my personal Instagram page. Watch as this teacher is first confused and then hopefully, I hope, she's delighted by the kids in her class showing their love for this classic.
Why this song? That's as loud as it gets, so you guys have to be quiet. I'm so confused. I don't know, it was requested. What is happening right now?
The kids may save us yet. Now let's have some comic content. The good and the bad. Let's start with one of our favourites, Ryan Long. We've had him on this program. Here he mocks the ginger and the whinger.
Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have decoupled. If you are a man out there looking for a woman that can you can shack up with her, she can sort of drain every last little bit of fame you, maybe extract you from your friends, your family, maybe you can have some projects together that she's going to be very creatively involved in that they'll all bomb.
Sure.
If you're looking for something like that, Meghan Markle is officially on the market.
I mean, this is the first I'm hearing of this.
If you're looking for a woman that can Jada Pinkett Smith style, just her presence can turn you into a laughing stock when at one point you were royalty, she can offer that. That should be in her Tinder bio.
Now to Colorado, where a comedian, Nick Swardson, I've never heard of Nick Swardson, but he was so bad that they killed his mic and forced him off stage. Have a look at this.
I mean, they turned the lights on and turned off the spotlight.
Dude,
And they turned off his mic.
this is wild.
Now they turned off his mic. Turn his mic off.
We've decided to conclude the show early in the best interest of those who bought tickets. We apologize for what you've seen tonight.
Joining me now is writer for the Washington Free Beacon, Drew Holden. We will get to some of this week's media shenanigans shortly, but I want to start with a great column you wrote highlighting how the hysteria and fears over what a Trump presidency would look like in 2016 actually came true under Biden's presidency instead. There's war in the Middle East, war in Europe. We've got an aggressive Iran, China, an aggressive Russia, economic downturns, government corruption. It's a long list. And yet Biden is running for re-election on his record.
That's right. I know it's really incredible when you think about it through that kind of lens, right? You've seen chaos in the Middle East. You've seen the enemies of the United States emboldened by weakness in foreign policy. And yet you're right. President Biden is trotting out and saying, look at all these things that I've done. He's got a very suppliant media who's spinning for him, and they've worked overtime to make it appear as if things aren't quite as bad as they look. But I think the average voter, the average person sitting back at home, looks at all this and says, oh, I'm not sure I'm very comfortable with everything that's going on across the world.
No, and yet the media, overwhelming bulk of the media, not all of the media, has been pretty soft on him. They push this narrative of hysteria and just constant crisis when Trump was in power, but they really have gone out of their way to protect the Biden administration.
Yeah, that's right. And, under Trump, one of the things that I think we saw time and time again was there were a lot of media predictions about future chaos, future problems, future disaster as a result of Donald Trump's supposedly harebrained policies, right? We saw this with Iran. We saw this with China. We saw this with Russia. The world is going to come unglued at the seams, right? Because Trump's policies were supposedly catastrophic, and he was surrounding himself with people who didn't have expertise. And then Biden comes into office. He surrounds himself with these people who the media really hyped up their expertise, their experience, their times going through other crises and being important decision makers. And that's when things come unglued. You have American service members who are killed in the Middle East, right? Russia invades Ukraine. There were so many just truly catastrophic outcomes that have happened. And yet, what does the media do as all of this is happening, right? They say, well, Trump can't win re-election because then things will surely get worse. That's when it's really going to go off the rails. It's going off the rails right now.
Well, yes, Trump being re-elected is a threat to democracy. Democracy in action is a threat to democracy. It's hard to follow the logic, but it's really hard to pinpoint the biggest disaster under Biden. Of course, the border crisis is huge, unprecedented, but then you've got the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan, you've got the cost of living issues, the energy policy. So it is a long list there. Now, you also wrote a fantastic piece this week about the media's many legal experts having egg on their face after the unanimous SCOTUS ruling. Tell me about this. Some of these media experts, supposed legal minds, thought Colorado was completely solid with their decision. I mean, I'm no lawyer, but I was looking from here in Melbourne, Australia, thinking this is madness. This could never stand up to any scrutiny. How did so many legal experts get it so wrong?
Yeah, I think one of the things that the demand always outpaces the supply of is outlandish media takes to push a liberal narrative on CNN and NBC and MSNBC and across a lot of the cable news shows, right? I think what really this boils down to is it's media wish casting. They really, really, really wanted the courts to step in and prevent Donald Trump from being on the ballot in Colorado, as the Colorado Supreme Court had ruled. I think as soon as it happened, a lot of people, and I think to the media's credit, even most of the media said, "Oh, this is probably going to get reviewed by the Supreme Court. I don't know if this is really going to hold water." But they needed that tension, right? They needed someone to come in and say, "No, your hopes and fantasies that the walls are closing in on Donald Trump, that it's real, that's really going to happen." And so you see these air quotes, legal experts who go on and say, "Oh yeah, the case is tough. He's already removed himself from being on the ballot. He's already done everything. We don't need to have Congress take action. We don't need to have a court finding of any kind. He's surely going to be thrown out when the Supreme Court makes the right decision." And then the Supreme Court found on Monday morning that they found unanimously 9-0 that what Colorado had done was improper and that Trump had to be allowed back on the ballot.
Now, Democrats and leftists, from activists like Mark Elias to broadcasters, including MSNBC's Lawrence O'Donnell, they're openly celebrating the weaponisation of the justice system and the fact that certain juries are unlikely to give Donald Trump a fair trial, particularly when you're talking about Washington, D.C., which is virulently anti-Trump.
Exactly 676 of them voted for Donald Trump. The reason that tiny vote is significant is that Donald Trump's jury pool for Special Prosecutor Jack Smith's case against Donald Trump for alleged crimes leading up to and on January 6th will be taken. That jury pool will be taken from those 700,000 people who spent yesterday not voting for Donald Trump. The odds of one of the 676 Republicans who did vote for Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. yesterday, ending up on his jury there, are worse than your odds with any lottery ticket you could buy anywhere.
Well, I don't know about the maths of the lottery, but Elias also tweeted, in a city of 700,000 people, Donald Trump got 676 votes in the GOP primary, a tough jury pool. And yes, even in the presidential election, Drew, I think he got 4% of the vote in 2016.
That
Trump,
sounds right.
5% in 2020. So yeah, that jury pool is certainly hostile. How can he possibly get a fair trial in DC?
Well, I think the reality is that he can't, right? And what you see folks like O'Donnell and Elias, some of these other kind of truly rabid liberals saying is, I think our system of justice will not do what it is supposed to do because it will punish Trump, right? And so I think it's what you're really seeing is it's an outcropping of viewing the world exclusively through the lens of Donald Trump. And in that case, folks in the media, folks on the left, anything is a weapon. Right? It can be important systems like our system of justice in this country. It doesn't matter, right? That's secondary to getting to evil Donald Trump out of office or off the ballot or whatever it is. And I think all of these sort of impulses spring from that same sentiment.
Well, why don't the Republicans do this? Why don't they find an area where it's 90%, 80% Republican and do this same thing to the Democrats, engage in this sort of lawfare? Perhaps that will stop the Democrats from doing it, because at the moment it's a free hit. Why wouldn't they engage in this sort of behaviour when Trump is obviously their number one opponent in the coming presidential election?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think that some of it is the Republican Party maybe trailing the left on some of the real knives coming out sort of tactics, right? I think that either because it hasn't occurred to them, or it's been kind of this, it's a fourth wall that people don't feel comfortable breaking. It gets left on the back burner. But really, what I think the real reason you're seeing it play out so consequentially right now is Democrats control most of the most influential courthouses in the country, right? You're seeing Trump face a trial in New York and in Fulton County in Georgia and in Washington, D.C. These are centers of power in the United States, particularly Washington, D.C., right?
Yes.
This is the home of our government. And so I think, unfortunately, you've got to play with the hand that you're dealt here. And the reality is this center of government, this center of justice, is going to have 95% of people vote for not the person who isn't the Republican candidate.
Drew Holden, thank you so much for your time this evening. And coming up, Army Horowitz with some shocking details about how California is incentivising illegal immigration with a no-payment home loan scheme. Can you believe that? That's after this. You're watching The Rita Panahi Show. Joining me now is filmmaker and journalist Army Horowitz. Now, former chief of the US Border Patrol has revealed on 60 Minutes just how little the Biden administration cares about protecting Americans from illegal immigrants. Have a look.
I've never had one conversation with the president or the vice president for that matter. And so I was the chief of the Border Patrol. I commanded 21,000 people. That's a problem.
Army, Joe Biden has time to talk to Insta influencers. He's got time to have late night TV hosts hanging out with him and getting ice cream. And of course, as VP, he was talking to Hunter Biden's many foreign business associates, but he cannot talk to the chief of the US Border Patrol during the worst immigration crisis the country has seen.
Yeah, he not only didn't talk to the current head of the Border Patrol, he didn't talk to the past head of the Border Control either. And not just him, but don't forget, Harris, by the way, is the head. She's the border czar. This is her job. This is what she's supposed to do for a living. But remember, she's also never been to Europe, right? This is the doubling down of the administration on a failed policy that's not only a failed policy for the country, but is going to bite him in the behind, because this has become one of the most important issues in this election. Yet even though he knows that, even though all the polls are telling him that, for some bizarre reason, he keeps doubling down on this insanity. And by the way, he doesn't have to look very far for another example in the Democratic Party. John Fetterman, the senator from Pennsylvania, who, by the way, came in as a left-winger, similar, by the way, to Kristen Sinema, who we all thought she was a Green Party advocate. He came in as a leftist, he has become not only a centrist, maybe even center-right. He has been hawkish on this border issue. He said that the border deal didn't go far enough. And guess what, Rita? He is up by 7% in the polls, while Joe Biden is down by almost 7% in the polls. Maybe he should learn something from someone in his own party. Maybe he should have a stroke. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. Bad joke.
It's a bad joke, but you're right. John Fetterman went into hospital and he seems to have emerged a different man, a different politician. It's incredible, the transformation, and I often find myself agreeing with him. And I remember what he stood for previously when he was running for Pennsylvania, the junior senator there. So here's a revelation. Now let's look at some of the government data. This is from the Biden administration itself, and they're predicting the population of asylum seekers and other migrants is going to surge from 6 million last year to 8 million this September. This is an increase of 167% compared to 5 years ago under Donald Trump. Army, this is going to be the top election issue. There's so many other issues, but I think this is going to be the number one issue. And at the same time, you've got states like California adding to this problem. A new bill introduced in California will allow illegal immigrants to qualify as first home buyers able to access the state's zero down, no payment home loan scheme, where they can get a loan of up to 20% of the price of a house, with that loan not accruing interest or requiring monthly payments.
I don't know which insanity to start with first, Rita, but let's begin with the 8 million people. 8 million asylum seekers inside the United States. Again, just in the last 5 years. This is not the total number, right? That's 2.5% of the U.S. population, to put it in context, right? And again, what they're trying to do is make it. They have loosened what it takes to become an asylum seeker, right? This is what they've done to be a magnet for people to come to this country. And again, you have to. I think people in Australia don't really, even people in this country, don't fully understand what happens when you cross the border, and not when you get through and are not caught. When you are actually caught, they didn't give you a notice for when to come back, which could be up to 10 years from that day. Now, do they come back? Of course they're not going to come back. Why would they come back? And so, of course, yeah, they could be technically asylum seekers, but they're not going to be deported, not under this administration, for sure. And talking about the home loan they're giving, this is a home loan, to be clear. This is not a home loan given just to illegal immigrants. It's a home loan that is essentially free of interest to anybody who can't afford a home, which, by the way, in of itself just doesn't make any economic sense for a state like California, but let's leave that aside. But they're allowing illegals to be part of this scheme. It is unbelievable to me, even for a state like California. Yet you want to ask why they're coming across the country. It's not because, like they say, the Biden administration, because of climate change, right? They're doing it because, of course, wouldn't you, Rita? Wouldn't you want to go to a place you can get a free home loan? Of course you would. That's what's bringing them here. That's why we have 8 million asylum seekers.
It's incentives. It's pull factors, not push factors. And we know there are economic migrants. They're not awful people. Some of them are awful people and criminals, but the overwhelming majority are not. But if you don't have control of your borders, if you don't have a genuine asylum seeker process, then you're lost, and the US is lost in this area. Now let's hear from President Joe Biden. Here he is asked about his poll numbers, and listen to how delusional this man is about what's happening.
So, President, what's your message to Democrats who are concerned about your poll numbers?
My poll numbers, the last 5 polls you guys don't report, I'm winning 5 in a row. You guys only look at the New York Times. They're a great paper.
Army, I don't know what to say about that. We've showed you plenty of polls on this program that are pretty clear about what's happening, what the trends are. Are Biden's handlers lying to him?
Yeah, he might be up 48-45 with the Biden family. Maybe that's the poll they're referring to. But the New York Times just came out with a poll. The New York Times, not exactly pro-Trump, right? Last time I checked, they were probably pretty much in the bag for Joe Biden. Trump is killing him in the polls in that particular one. And of course, we've talked about this before, but I think it's worth talking about it again, in that the crosstabs, right? It's not just the overall number that is showing how Trump is going to trounce Joe Biden. So, right, if the election was held today, but the crosstabs are horrendous. You're talking about he's going to win the Hispanics outright. 46-40, he is winning Hispanics. This is coming from a president who they love to say, talked about how he said all the criminals are Mexicans and how he loves Mexicans. Their tostadas are so great. That guy is up 46-40. He is Biden only has 66% of the black vote. That sounds like a lot. It's a majority, but that's down from 92%. You can't. That's his entire coalition. The coalition of the dispossessed, the coalition of victims, right? Black people, Hispanics. He can't gain ground. He's losing ground, tons of ground in his core constituency. If the election, Rita, the election was held today, he would lose 293 to 245 to President Trump. That is no bueno for the president.
That's astonishing. I can't believe the black vote has plummeted that much for Biden, because it is normally such a solid voting bloc, 90% plus they can count on, and that's fracturing. Army Horowitz, thank you so much for your time. And that's it from me tonight. Don't go anywhere. Up next is Newsnight. Good night.